This story begins with a boy who is obsessed with the scent of perfume produced by a virgin girl. His interest in the scent makes him glorified like an angel. How is the story? Prepare your favorite snacks and drinks because the story will begin. This story begins with a woman who works as a fish seller in a market where she is heavily pregnant. Unexpectedly, that day was the day her child would be born in the market. It was normal for her because this was the 5th child she had given birth to in the market. Without anyone's help and only armed with a knife, usually the children born to this mother do not live long, and usually these innocent babies will be thrown into the final disposal site along with rotten fish, but the baby chose differently. A cry was heard. Suddenly the cry became the spotlight of the surrounding residents, until finally when people were watching the baby, the mother had run away. The birth of the child was also the death of the mother because she had tried to abandon her child. The government regulation there, every child born without a father and mother or a child who is intentionally abandoned by their parents will be sent to an orphanage. The next trial was experienced by the baby. The children in the orphanage did not really like him until finally they planned to smother him until he was unconscious. The plan failed. Then the poor baby was named John. At the age of 12, John realized that he had an interesting talent. At that time he began to recognize the scents around him. In the orphanage, John was considered strange by the other children because sometimes he did unusual things like smelling dead mice. At the age of 15, John was sold to a textile factory that was short of workers. The unique thing about this John is that every time he leaves the place where he previously lived, the owner or the person who took care of him will have bad luck. It started with John being invited to the market to deliver leather to his customers. Apparently John smelled a scent that was more fragrant than the perfume he had smelled earlier. The scent apparently came from the body of a traveling apple seller girl. Since childhood John had never learned manners, it was natural for the girl to be afraid of John's strange treatment. Not long after, John found the girl cutting fruit, and without the girl realizing it, John was already behind her sniffing her body. Suddenly the girl was shocked and screamed, so that her screams would not invite local residents with John's alertness. After returning from there, John thought all night about how to get the scent without having to lose the person. He was assigned to deliver goat skin to his boss's customer, where the customer was a famous perfume maker in the city, named Maldini. He smelled various types of aromas that he had never smelled before. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, John showed his talent. He said that Maldini wanted to make a famous perfume, but until now he had never been able to make it. Then Maldini challenged John to mix the famous perfume, but Maldini was curious about this one person. Finally John mixed the perfume in front of Maldini. Initially Maldini doubted that this would work because the way John mixed and stirred it had really made the white-haired man annoyed. In fact, John succeeded and Maldini sat silently. John said that it was not the best. He took some ingredients and started mixing the new perfume again. Their Maldini sold it expensively. He didn't want to try John's new concoction and told the sensitive nose to go home. Maldini secretly took and tried the new concoction. The next day Maldini came to John's workplace, and that day John was bought. As usual, John's next victim, the goatskin seller's boss, had an unfortunate fate at night. Finally, John became an employee at Maldini's shop as a perfume maker. One day John dreamed about the apple seller girl and told Maldini how to extract perfume. Hearing the chaos underground, Maldini woke up and found John, who was frustrated. At the end of the conversation, Maldini said that you would not be able to catch the scent of living things. Those words immediately made John faint and die. In a dying state, John asked if there was a way to catch the smell. Finally John told the formula that had been agreed upon previously. That day was a happy day for Maldini. He could sleep soundly and didn't wake up the next day. While heading to his destination city, John's nose smelled an extraordinary aroma that amazed and fascinated him. The scent was very similar to the previous apple-carrying girl. To survive and sharpen his skills, John worked at a famous perfume factory. There was a pair of foremen. Let's call them Mr. Bimo and Killa. They were the people responsible for the quality of the perfume produced. But it seemed that Mr. Bimo didn't like John. Not wanting to wait long, John immediately targeted a woman whose partner had left her because she failed to plant at night. John immediately picked up the woman, and that day she was boiled with rose extract. But unfortunately his experiment ended in failure and was almost caught by the flower delivery women. The second experiment began again. This time the victim was a woman who was satisfied with the pug she always brought. Initially, this woman was not suspicious of John bringing animal fat to make perfume because she had often served her clients who had unusual behavior. Animal fat was wrapped around his hand slowly, and John began to bandage the woman's hand. because the woman saw the sharp object that John was carrying. Of course the woman cancelled it, and while packing, John immediately hit her with a blunt object. As a result, the woman died. Finally, steam after steam became a drop of body fragrance liquid was created. The next day a pile of lifeless meat was found, bald and not wearing clothes. To test the perfume, John put a few drops on his hand, and sure enough, the victim's dog thought that John was his master. Back to the figure of the girl that John admired that he met on the street. Her name is Laura. She is the daughter of a local official. John had to thank Putri and Shinta because they both had opened up opportunities for John to kidnap Laura. In the maze, people were hiding and trying to find Laura. While playing behind Laura, there was already her cousin who followed, until finally they were both separated, and this was John's chance to act. If you think that Laura will be kidnapped, you are wrong. Mysterious black figure at the end of the hallway. Realizing that his twin cousin was not found, they all scattered to look for him. But on the other hand, John had processed them both into perfume. The condition of the village got worse when 2 bodies were found floating in the river. An impromptu meeting was held. While these officials were still busy in meetings, John was busy with his actions, which day by day the girls in the village were decreasing. Without realizing it, John's collection of bottles had almost reached 12 bottles. The residents were given firearms to protect each other, but the reality was different. They even shot each other because they accused each other. The next day, the village held a big party because for them the criminal had been caught. Anthony came to her and intended to pick up Laura, but unfortunately Laura refused. He slapped his son in public and Laura ran away. John should have thanked Anthony for opening up opportunities for him to cultivate Laura, but fate said otherwise. The next day, John was woken up by his nose that smelled. Laura's scent had moved away from the village. Her father realized that Laura was the next target. After arriving at one of the remote residents' houses, it seemed they would stay there temporarily. Finally, John arrived at Laura's place. All the preparations, including the sacred club, had been prepared. Like an angel of Reaper, John walked through the window of the homeowner's room and past the guard dog without anyone waking up. Even Anthony, who was fast asleep that night, did not feel John's presence at all. The next day, when Anthony was getting ready to invite Laura to breakfast, he found her bald and undressed lying on her bed. Finally, the 12 perfumes collected by John are now complete. Who knows what their function and purpose are? No one knows yet. But while extracting animal fat, John was caught by armed troops and he was arrested on the hill. Do you think this movie ends here? Of course not, kids. When the news spread that the murderer who had terrorized their village had been caught, they flocked to John's execution ground. Until the executioner's arrival was eagerly awaited. The horse-drawn carriage carrying the convict arrived. All eyes were on it. But who would have thought that it was John? Like an official, he slowly climbed the execution podium and met the executioner. Everyone was surprised and silent when they saw him. Even the executioner, who had previously held back his anger for John, now knelt before him, put a drop of the liquid on a piece of tissue and waved it. How powerful the perfume was! He could subdue an entire district in just one swing. Unexpectedly, the 12 perfumes that John had concocted from the results of hunting girls produced an aroma that made people immediately want to plant cassava. In the crowd, this was the first time John shed tears. How could he not when people were busy with their partners? John could only watch without feeling the love he received. And in the crowd, he remembered the apple seller girl he first met. John could only love her in his dreams. Actually, John is not a bad person. It's just that when he was little he was not taught how to behave well, because when John was born, his mother planned to throw him away.